My name is Kennedy Martinez, and at 28, I thought I'd found my perfect home in the prestigious Ocean View Heights condominium complex. The sleek glass towers overlooked the Pacific, and my corner unit on the 15th floor had breathtaking views that stretched for miles. What I hadn't anticipated was the nightmare that would unfold with the condo board, a group of self-important residents who seemed to take pleasure in making my life miserable. Little did they know, their dismissive attitude toward the young Latina girl who probably stretched to afford this place would soon come back to haunt them in ways they never imagined. The trouble began almost immediately after I moved in 6 months ago. I'd submitted renovation plans to update my unit's dated kitchen and bathrooms. Nothing extravagant, just modern fixtures and a more open layout. The plans were professionally drawn by a licensed architect and met all building codes. I'd saved for years working as a software engineer at a major tech company, and this renovation represented my dream of creating the perfect home. But when I attended my first board meeting to present my proposal, the reception was ice cold. The 5-member board, led by Chairman Robert Whitman, barely glanced at my carefully prepared presentation before dismissing it outright. "Miss Martinez," Robert had said, his tone dripping with condescension, "these types of renovations require extensive review. We have standards to maintain in this building." His wife, Patricia, who served as the board secretary, nodded vigorously from beside him. "Perhaps you should consider something more modest for your first renovation project." The other board members, wealthy retirees Harold Chen, Margaret Foster, and developer James Sullivan, murmured their agreement. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as they scheduled my proposal for further review at the next meeting. Walking out of that conference room, I realized this wasn't about building codes or standards. This was about them putting me in what they perceived as my place. Over the following months, the pattern became clear. My renovation plans were rejected repeatedly, each time with increasingly petty complaints. "The flooring samples don't match the building's aesthetic," Patricia would sniff. "The lighting fixtures are too modern for our classic building," Harold would add pompously. Margaret constantly questioned whether I could afford the renovations, suggesting I start with something more reasonable. Meanwhile, they approved elaborate renovations for other residents without hesitation, including a complete gut renovation of the penthouse by a cryptocurrency millionaire who'd moved in after me. The double standard was glaringly obvious, but they acted as though their decisions were purely objective. The worst part was how they treated me during these meetings. Robert would speak to me like I was a child who didn't understand the complexities of condo management. "Young lady, you need to understand that this building has a reputation to maintain," he'd lecture, while Patricia took detailed notes of every objection I raised, as if building a case against me. James Sullivan, who owned 3 units in the building, would barely acknowledge my presence, often scrolling through his phone while I presented my revised plans. They made it clear that they viewed me as an unwelcome intruder in their exclusive community, someone who'd somehow slipped through the cracks but didn't truly belong. What they didn't know was that my surname wasn't just Martinez. It was Martinez Chen. My mother had kept her maiden name professionally, and most people assumed I was just another young professional struggling to make it in an expensive city. In reality, my maternal grandfather, Chen Wei-ming, had been one of the most successful real estate developers on the West Coast before his death 3 years ago. He'd built half the luxury developments in the city, including several high-rise complexes similar to Ocean View Heights. My mother, Dr. Elena Martinez Chen, ran the family's extensive property management company, overseeing a portfolio worth hundreds of millions. I'd chosen to use only Martinez professionally, wanting to make my own way without trading on the family name. The breaking point came during my sixth rejected proposal. I'd spent weeks working with my architect to address every single concern the board had raised, no matter how ridiculous. The new plans were flawless, conservative, and completely within building guidelines. Yet Robert dismissed them before I'd even finished my presentation. "Miss Martinez, I think it's time we discussed whether this building is really the right fit for someone of your background," he said, his meaning crystal clear. Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Perhaps a smaller building would be more appropriate for your lifestyle and budget." The room fell silent as the other board members shifted uncomfortably, but none of them spoke up to defend me. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my mother the next morning and explained the situation. Elena Martinez Chen was not someone who tolerated discrimination in any form. Within hours, she'd connected me with the family's real estate attorney and our most trusted property acquisition specialist. "If they want to play games about who belongs in that building," she said with steel in her voice, "let's show them exactly who they're dealing with." We discovered something interesting during our research. Several board members were facing financial pressure due to failed investments and market downturns. Robert's consulting firm was hemorrhaging clients. Harold had massive gambling debts, and Margaret's late husband had left her with more property than liquid assets. Their arrogance had blinded them to their own vulnerabilities. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering and strategic purchases. Through a series of shell companies and private transactions, we began acquiring shares in the management company that operated Ocean View Heights. We also purchased the outstanding loans on 3 board members' units, along with several units that were quietly being sold by residents facing their own financial pressures. Every move was legal, documented, and executed with the precision that had made our family one of the most successful real estate dynasties in the state. Meanwhile, the board continued treating me like an unwelcome pest, completely oblivious to the fact that their dismissive behavior had triggered a complete restructuring of their entire world. The final piece fell into place when Harold Chen, ironically sharing my grandfather's surname though no relation, desperately needed to sell his unit to cover his gambling debts. Through our intermediaries, we purchased it at market value, giving us the controlling interest we needed. By the time I walked into the next board meeting, the Martinez Chen Family Trust owned 43% of all units in the building, held the management contract, and controlled the debt on most of the remaining properties. The board members sat in their usual seats, wearing the same smug expressions they'd displayed for months, completely unaware that their kingdom had already fallen. "Good evening, everyone," I said, taking my usual seat at the back of the room. Robert began the meeting with his typical self-importance, discussing various building matters before calling for my renovation proposal. "Miss Martinez, I trust you've prepared something more reasonable this time," he asked with his familiar condescending smile. Instead of pulling out architectural plans, I opened my leather portfolio and placed a stack of legal documents on the table. "Actually, Robert, I have something different to present tonight. My name is Kennedy Martinez Chen, and as of yesterday, my family's trust owns this building." The color drained from every face around the table as I continued speaking in the same calm, professional tone they'd dismissed for months. "I'd like to introduce myself properly," I continued, watching their expressions shift from confusion to dawning horror. "My grandfather, Chen Wei-ming, developed most of the luxury properties in this city, including the building techniques used in Ocean View Heights construction. My mother, Dr. Elena Martinez Chen, currently manages the largest private real estate portfolio on the West Coast. And I, the young lady you've been patronizing for months, just became your new landlord." I slid copies of the ownership documents across the table, watching as Patricia's hands trembled while she tried to read the legal text. Harold's face had gone completely white, and James Sullivan was frantically scrolling through his phone, likely checking his own financial exposure. Robert attempted to maintain his composure, but his voice cracked as he spoke. This is highly irregular. The management company would have notified us of any ownership changes. I smiled the same polite smile I'd given them during months of rejection. The management company did notify you in writing as required by law. Unfortunately, you were all too busy dismissing the young Latina girl to pay attention to the certified letters piling up in your mailboxes. Margaret Foster, who'd spent months questioning my financial capability, was now staring at documents showing she owed my family's trust over $200,000 on her underwater mortgage. The irony was delicious. The woman who'd suggested I couldn't afford renovations was now technically my tenant. Now, I continued, let's discuss those renovation plans you've been rejecting. As the majority owner, I'm approving my original proposal immediately. I'm also implementing some building-wide improvements that have been long overdue, starting with a complete review of the board's decision-making processes. The room was dead silent except for the sound of Patricia's nervous pen clicking. In fact, I think it's time for new board leadership. Robert, your term ends immediately. Patricia, Harold, Margaret, you're all dismissed effective tonight. James, since you actually own your units outright, you can stay if you agree to follow the new management guidelines. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that none of them could even formulate a response. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Robert's consulting firm lost its remaining clients within weeks as word spread about his treatment of the building's new owner and the connections that came with the Martinez Chen name. Patricia found herself scrambling to find new employment after her dismissive attitude toward me reached her own professional network. Harold was forced to enter debt counseling and sell his remaining assets to avoid bankruptcy. Margaret, faced with the reality of her financial situation, had to downsize to a modest apartment across town. Only James Sullivan remained, now serving as the sole remaining original board member under very different circumstances than he'd enjoyed before. My renovation proceeded exactly as I'd originally planned, completed by contractors who'd worked on my grandfather's developments for decades. The updated unit was everything I dreamed of, modern, elegant, and perfectly suited to my needs. More importantly, the building's atmosphere changed completely under new management. The discriminatory practices that had made life difficult for younger residents, people of color, and anyone deemed unsuitable by the old guard were eliminated immediately. New board members were elected democratically with transparent processes that welcomed input from all residents, regardless of their background or perceived wealth status. 6 months later, Ocean View Heights had transformed into the inclusive, professionally managed community it should have been all along. Property values increased significantly under proper management, benefiting everyone who'd chosen to stay. The building attracted a diverse group of new residents who appreciated both the luxury amenities and the welcoming atmosphere. I'd kept my unit exactly as I'd always wanted it, but more importantly, I'd ensured that no other resident would face the discrimination and dismissiveness that had made my first months there so miserable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just personal satisfaction. It's systematic change that prevents others from experiencing the same injustice. Looking back, I realized the old board had given me an unexpected gift. Their arrogance and prejudice had forced me to reveal strengths I'd preferred to keep private, connecting me more deeply with my family's business legacy. I'd started using Martinez Chen professionally, embracing the opportunities that came with my heritage while maintaining the independent identity I'd worked so hard to establish. The experience had taught me that sometimes hiding your power serves no one, least of all yourself. When people show you who they are through their treatment of others, believe them and respond accordingly. The most satisfying part wasn't their shock or embarrassment, though watching Robert's face as he realized he'd been condescending to his new landlord was certainly memorable. What truly mattered was proving that assumptions about someone's background, age, or appearance often reveal more about the person making them than their target. The old board had looked at me and seen someone they could dismiss, someone whose concerns didn't matter, someone who didn't deserve basic respect. They'd been wrong on every count, and their dismissive behavior had cost them everything they'd thought made them powerful. As I sit in my beautifully renovated home, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in brilliant oranges and purples, I'm grateful for the lesson this experience taught me. Power unused is often power wasted, but power revealed at the right moment can change everything. The condo board that had once rejected my renovation plans had inadvertently given me something far more valuable: the opportunity to transform not just my own living situation, but the entire culture of our community. Sometimes the best victories are the ones that create lasting positive change for everyone involved.